فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كلامه المجيد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون صدق الله العظيم. Alhamdulillah, respected brothers, elders, sisters listening. So thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the ability to take out some time from our daily busy lives. And this is what you call tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many people knew about the program, received the invitation about the program, but weren't able to come. So this is what you call divine ability. So although someone might be able to do something, but in order to translate this into action, a person needs of divine ability. And this is what we call hidayah or tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah never looks at a person's ability to do something or how capable that person is. Allah never looks at a person's intellectual ability before accepting that person for tawfiq or for hidayah. I'll give you an example of Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam, he was a person who had a stutter in his, had stutter in his speech, and he wasn't able to speak properly. But such a person who was not able to speak or articulate his thoughts properly, Allah chose that person for the effort of da'wah, to speak and to call people towards Allah. Allah sent him to Fir'aun. So Allah didn't look at his physical capability. Is this person the most capable person to do this effort? Because Harun alayhi salam was more eloquent than him. Harun, his brother, was more eloquent than Musa alayhi salam. But despite this, Allah chose Musa alayhi salam because he had the qubuliyyah, he had the tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first and foremost, we have to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has given us this tawfiq to leave the comforts of our homes and to come to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَحَبُّ الْبِلَادِ إِلَى اللَّهِ مَسَاجِدُهَا, that the most greatest of all places in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to, from the depth of our heart, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this. So the purpose of this talk is how we can get this tawfiq. This is the purpose of this talk. Before I was going to mainly discuss the fiqh of Ramadan, but I decided after consulting a few brothers as well, that mainly I'm going to discuss the spirituality of Ramadan. Inshallah, at the end we'll discuss briefly, if we have time, regarding some of the fiqh of Ramadan, and if brothers or sisters have any questions, they can also ask me as well. And if you need to do another session, we can do so as well. So how do we gain tawfiq in this month of Ramadan? Because many Ramadans have gone by, one after another. And we have to think to ourselves and analyze how much change has each Ramadan brought into my life. And me as a speaker, I am in need of every single thing that I'm saying. Ibn Mubarak, rahimullah, he used to, before giving a speech, he used to start crying. He used to start crying before giving a speech. And the people around him were confused that, how come you're crying before giving a speech? And then he said to the people that you think that I enjoy talking in front of you, whereas I do not know whether this talk will be for me or against me on the day of judgment. So number one, the speaker needs to benefit from the speech as well. And number two, it's a reminder for yourself, it's a reminder for me as well. Many things that I'll talk about, it will be knowledge that something that you already know. But Allah says, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and remind one another because this reminder is beneficial for the believers. So Allah has commanded us to remind one another. And reminder is something that you already know, which is in the back of our minds. So when someone reminds us, it puts it in the front of our minds and it benefits us. So I myself as a speaker is also in need of this reminder as well. And the third thing, especially the speaker is in need of, is ikhlas. Mawlana, one of the scholars of the Indian subcontinent, used to say that a person who has ikhlas, this is how you determine if a person has ikhlas and sincerity. That when someone praises you and someone rebukes you, is exactly the same to you. When someone praises you and says, MashaAllah, so many good things about you, it doesn't change anything in you. Because you know that it's only Allah that gave you the tawfiq, and in reality, they're not praising you, they're praising Allah. But when someone says something against you, it doesn't harm you either. Because you know that you've done it for the sake of Allah, then why should the negative comments of the people harm you? So the dua of the Prophet ﷺ regarding Ramadan, although the scholars, there is dispute regarding the scholars, regarding the authenticity of the hadith, but the general muhaddithin, they say that its weakness is such that it can be used. So the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, that Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan, that oh Allah, bless us in the month of Rajab and Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan, and give us the tawfiq, the divine ability to make us reach the month of Ramadan. So this is where the preparation of the Prophet ﷺ started. Many months prior to the coming of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ would initiate his preparation. Comes in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, the month that used to fast most after the month of Ramadan was the month of Sha'ban. He used to fast almost the entire month of Sha'ban except for the last few months, so the last few days in which he used to use it to rest, to regain his energy for the month of Ramadan. So normally what happens before the coming of the month of Ramadan, we fail to prepare for this month. Until this month of Ramadan starts, and by the time we've gotten used to fasting and the worship of Allah, the entire Ramadan goes. So now what happens before, normally we fail to prepare for this month. And as this month comes in, by the time we've gotten used to the month of Ramadan, the entire month finishes, and then by the time we've actually started to prepare, we've been able to prepare ourselves, this month is finished, and we're back to our daily routine. This is very important to start preparing for this month before the month comes. We prepare for it spiritually, physically. The Prophet ﷺ will start fasting to prepare physically. He'll start preparing spiritually. And wasting one Ramadan is as if we wasted the entire year. Now the Prophet, famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he took one step to the minbar and said Ameen. He took another step, he said Ameen. He took another step and said Ameen. And one of these reasons was, after inquiry from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, that destruction be to that person, or woe be to that person, the month of Ramadan comes and he's not able to get his sins forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So wasting Ramadan is as if it's like wasting the entire year. This is why before this month of Ramadan comes, we have to be ready for this month. What am I supposed to do, and how do I prepare for this month? So the first question that needs to be answered is, why do we fast in the month of Ramadan? Is it because every year we fast and it's something we have to do? Or is it because, it's culture and tradition? If I don't fast, then, what's my family going to think of me? Or what are my friends or my society going to say? So what is the reason that we fast? But firstly, Allah says in the Quran, so in the whole of Quran, Allah discusses the month of Ramadan in one place. And the purpose of fasting. We must have heard this 1,000 times. So Allah says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. Can you hear this? Yeah. Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, that O you who believe, kutiba alaykumus siyam, fasting has been made obligatory upon you, just how it was made compulsory upon the people before you, la'allakum tattaqun, so that you may have taqwa. And we're going to inshallah discuss throughout the talk what is the meaning of taqwa, and how did the pious predecessors fast? What did they think, or what was the concept of fasting according to them, and what has the concept of fasting become according to us? Preparing before this talk, I was reading one of the works of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. He's a scholar from the 7th century. And he discusses the purpose of fasting, the fast of the Salaf, the Tabi'een, and how they used to fast. And I was amazed at how he was explaining this. And I kept on reading, and it was difficult for me to actually prepare this talk. Because once I start reading, and you just continue to read and read, even if though it's irrelevant for the talk, and then once you accumulate so much, is how to put it, in a systemized way and deliver the talk. But I'll try my best, inshallah. So we have to, first of all, what is the purpose of month of Ramadan? It's not just to stay hungry and stay thirsty. There's a higher purpose in this. Now I'm going to spend most of this talk explaining one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's a hadith that everyone has heard before. But inshallah, I'll try to elaborate further upon this hadith. The hadith is the hadith of Nasa'i and has been authenticated by numerous scholars, including the likes of Imam Al-Albani rahimahullah, where it's narrated from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ said, ما من حسنة عملها ابن آدم إلا كتب له 10 حسنات إلى 700 ضعف. That every single deed the son of Adam, i.e. a person does, it is multiplied by 10 to 700 times. So imagine this reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any good deed that a person does, any time throughout the year, the rewards of that is multiplied by 10 to 700 times. Reading the Quran, performing salah, hajj, umrah, depending on the quality of that action and sincerity, the reward will be multiplied minimum of 10 to 100, maximum of 700, sorry. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِلَّا الصِّيَامِ, except for fasting. So the Prophet ﷺ says that fasting is exempt from this general rule of being multiplied by 10 to 700 times. فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. I'm going through the hadith, inshallah, step by step. I'll explain every part of this hadith. And then the Prophet says, فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. Indeed, then Allah says that indeed this fasting is for me and I myself will recompense it. يَدَعُ شَهْوَتَهُ وَطَعَامَهُ مِنْ أَجَلِي. He leaves his carnal desires and his food and drink only for my sake. As-siyamu junnah. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, fasting is a shield. لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ. For the fasting person are two happiness. فَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ فِطْرِهِ. First happiness, obviously, everyone would have guessed, in the time of iftar. وَفَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ لِقَاءِ رَبِّهِ. And the second happiness is the meeting between the slave and his Lord. And then the Prophet ﷺ finishes, وَلَخَلُوفُ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أَطْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ. That the fragrance or the smell coming out from the mouth of a fasting person is more desired and pleasurable to Allah than the fragrance of musk. أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. So this is the hadith. So now the first question will come to mind is, why is fasting exempt from the general principle of 10 to 700 times that each and every good deed is multiplied by? If someone said, Allah will give us 700 rewards for each fast that we keep, everyone would be happy with this. This is plenty of reward to be happy with, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to tell us for every fast we'll get 700 rewards and then multiply by 30 for the 30 days. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying that the rewards of fasting is much greater than this. So now the question is why? Why does fasting is held in such high esteem to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? First of all, then I came across this verse to help us understand this better. That in Surah Al-Zumar, verse number 10, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that after describing quality of the believers and his slaves, then Allah finishes the verse with إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. That the rewards of the fasting persons will be given to them بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, without any account whatsoever. So now the question is, what does this mean? That the rewards of the sabirin will be given without any account. Then I checked in Tafsir al-Baydawi, and what it said is that the rewards of a sabir, a person that is patient, his rewards will be given that no calculation can calculate the amount of rewards that this person will receive. In the Tafsir of Ibn Kathir, it states that the rewards of the fasting person will be such that on the Day of Judgment, everyone's deeds will be given according to their number of good deeds performed. Whereas the sabir, a person who's patient, the rewards were given to him without any calculation. How a person just takes from a bag of gold, as much as he can, just gives it to the person, without even calculating how much he's giving. And how does this relate to fasting? Because this verse is about sabirin, those that are patient. Now we're talking about fasting over here. So now we come to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the narrations of Tirmidhi, the narrations of Abu Dawood, that the Prophet ﷺ said, Ramadan is a month of sabr, the month of patience. In the narration of Tirmidhi, the Prophet ﷺ said, As-sawmu nisfu sabr, that fasting is half of patience. Why? Now first we have to understand what does sabr actually mean. So fasting is sabr. But so, okay, now what does sabr mean? What does patience actually mean? Then if you look into the statements of the ulama of the past, they explain technically what does sabr actually mean. They say sabr refers to three things. As-sabru ala ta'atillah, that patience upon the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one type of patience. Patience upon the obedience of Allah. Number two, as-sabru an maharimillah, or ma'asiyatillah. Sabr away from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the second type of patience. And the third type of patience is when any difficulty or trial falls upon us, then we're patient. And we hope reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything bad that happens to us, we're patient and we hope that rewarding it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Three types of patience. Now in fasting, how many of these types of patience are found? Number one, as-sabru ala ta'atillah, in the obedience of Allah, away from the disobedience of Allah. And no one has to explain the difficulties of the fast of the month of Ramadan in the heat. When a person is hungry, thirsty, having to work, look after the children, cook the Ramadan iftar. Imagine the difficulty that we go through. Three types of patience are found in fasting in the month of Ramadan. This is why fasting holds so much reward in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So reward, this is just for, by the way, this is rewards for fasting throughout any time of the year. Not just for Ramadan, this is for any time of the year. Whereas in the month of Ramadan, deeds are multiplied even more. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, so deeds are multiplied due to the rewards of good deeds are multiplied due to many different reasons. For example, place. A place being special will require that the reward is also multiplied. Anyone think of an example? Which place were the rewards multiplied?
Mosque.
Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ's masjid said one salah is equal to 1,000 salah. And time as well. And the example of a time is the month of Ramadan. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ فِيهِ بِخَصَّةٍ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ كَانَ كَمَنْ أَدَّى فَرِيضَةً فِي مَا سِوَاهُ. Whoever does one nafil deed in the month of Ramadan will be rewarded with one fard, as if he's done a single fard act. And whoever does a fard act in the month of Ramadan will be returned and rewarded with 70, as if he's done 70 fard acts in the month of Ramadan. Once a person came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, أَيُّ الصَّوْمِ أَفْضَلُ بَعْدَ Ramadan? He said, after the fasting of Ramadan, which fasting has the most virtue? He said, قِيلَ. Then he said, شَعْبَانِ لِتَعْظِيمِ Ramadan. He said the month of Sha'ban, due to the ta'zim and the greatness of Ramadan. Because Sha'ban is next to Ramadan, Sha'ban holds the most reward after Ramadan. And then he was said to the Prophet ﷺ, فَأَيُّ الصَّدَقَةِ أَفْضَلُ? Then which sadaqah, charity, is most virtuous? Then the Prophet ﷺ said, صَدَقَةٌ فِي Ramadan, that charity which is given in the month of Ramadan. Another hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِذَا كَانَ رَمَضَانِ اعْتَمِرِي فِيهِ. When it is the month of Ramadan, then perform your umrah in this month. فَإِنَّ عُمْرَةً فِي رَمَضَانَ حَجَّةً. Because that umrah which is performed in the month of Ramadan is equal to a hajj in this month. So Allah multiplies the rewards, the good deeds of this month by many times over. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said in the narration of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that إِذَا دَخَلَ شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ, that when the month of Ramadan enters, غُلِّقَتْ أَبْوَابُ جَهَنَّمْ, that the doors of Jahannam are closed. وَفُتِحَتْ أَبْوَابُ الرَّحْمَةِ, and the doors of mercy are open. وَسُلْسِلَةِ الشَّيَاطِينَ, and the shayateen are chained up. And this is why when it comes to the month of Ramadan, it's very easy to perform good deeds. Even those people that do not pray salah for the entire year begin to pray the salah. Those people that are continuously engaged in fulfilling their desires. Whatever comes in our nafs we do, whether it's disobedience of Allah, whatever it is. Well, as soon as month of Ramadan comes, we even leave our basic necessities that we need to live just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is a command. So this is the barakah and blessings of this month. Now let's look at some of the aqwal of the Salaf. How did they treat this month of Ramadan? What was their attitude towards it? It wasn't just a month of not eating and not drinking. Firstly, comes in another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ عَمْلَ الصَّائِمِ مُضَاعَفٌ, that the rewards of a fasting person is multiplied by many times over. Abu Bakr ibn Abi Maryam narrates from some aqwal of the pious ulama of the past. He narrates from his teachers, that his mashayikh used to say, إِذَا حَضَرَ شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ, that when the month of Ramadan enters, فَانْبَسِطُوا فِيهِ بِالنَّفَقَةِ, then spend in the month of Ramadan abundantly. فَإِنَّ النَّفَقَةَ فِيهِ مُضَاعَفَةٌ كَالنَّفَقَةِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, because spending in the month of Ramadan is equal to spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. وَتَسْبِيحَةٌ فِيهِ أَفْضَلُ مِنْ أَلْفِ تَسْبِيحَةٍ فِي غَيْرِهِ, doing one tasbih in this month is equal to doing 1,000 tasbih outside the month of Ramadan. This is how the ulama of the past hold this month in esteem. Ibrahim al-Nakhai, the famous teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, one of the tabi'een of Kufa. Ibrahim al-Nakhai, then Aswad al-Qama Hamad al-Ibrahim, Imam Abu Hanifa. Ibrahim al-Nakhai was that person who most of the Hanafi fiqh comes from, through Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He used to say, صَوْمُ يَوْمِ Ramadan أَفْضَلُ مِنْ أَلْفِ يَوْمٍ, fasting one day of the month of Ramadan is better than fasting 1,000 days which is apart from the month of Ramadan. وَتَسْبِيحَةٌ فِيهِ أَفْضَلُ مِنْ أَلْفِ تَسْبِيحَةٍ, one tasbih is more virtuous than 1,000 tasbihs outside the month of Ramadan. وَرَكَعَةٌ فِيهِ أَفْضَلُ مِنْ أَلْفِ رَكَعَةٍ, one performing one rak'at of salah is greater than 1,000 rak'at outside the month of Ramadan. So this is why, first we've understood the first part of the hadith. Why fasting holds so much reward, especially in the month of Ramadan? Because fasting is a form of patience, and patience, Allah says, He gives their reward abundantly without any calculation. So now we move on to the second part of the hadith. فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. If anyone remembers what the second part of the hadith was. That fasting is for me, and I myself will recompense it. Now what does this actually mean? I heard this so many times and I never knew what this meant. I had a brief idea. Because every single good deed is for Allah, isn't it? Salah. If I prayed for someone else, my salah will not be accepted. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ even says regarding salah, مَنْ صَلَّى يُرَائِ فَقَدْ أَشْرَكَ, whoever performs salah for someone else, he's performed shirk. مَنْ تَصَدَّقَ يُرَائِ فَقَدْ أَشْرَكَ, whoever gives sadaqah for someone else, he performs shirk. So what does this mean? Fasting is for me and I myself will recompense it. And actually, it was in the back of my mind what this meant, but I never understood this hadith properly until I read the works of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. Anyone know what this means? With a satisfactory explanation. Anyone can guess what it means? Why is Sawm for Allah, and why isn't He said this about the rest of the actions? Anyone?
Only you can judge. So you're fasting, but no one knows whether you are or not yet. With salah, people can see you visually.
Okay, mashallah. This is actually one explanation given by the scholars of the past. Out of all the explanations, this was one of the best explanations I found. Mashallah. There's another explanation as well. That there's a hadith narrated by Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah, and I'm going to come back to that. That on the day of resurrection, every single good deed will come into our account, and anyone that we have wronged ever in our life, taken away their rights, harmed, abused, hurt, done something wrong to, which they didn't deserve, one by one, this is the first opinion that I found of the ulama, and I'm going to come to that opinion. One by one, they'll come and take from my good deeds. See, if I've sworn at someone, Allah will take me to task and my punishment will be that that person can take the amount of good deeds according to how much wrong I've done to him. That one person will come take my good deeds, another person, another person, another person, another person. Some people will even become bankrupt. That all the good deeds that they've done entire life will be taken away. And when the good deeds run out, the people's bad deeds that they've wronged will come onto that person. And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is the muflis, this is the bankrupt person. Whereas Sufyan ibn Uyayna, famous muhaddith of the past, narrates, which you record in Shu'ab al-Iman of Bayhaqi, he says that once the people start keep on taking his rewards, then when it comes to fasting, Allah will withhold that reward. Allah will keep that reward with him. And Allah will say that this فَإِنَّهُ لِي, this reward is specifically for me, this cannot be touched by any other person. وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ, and I will reward him specifically for this fast until I take him to Jannah. This is one interpretation of the ulama. Another interpretation is that fasting is purely leaving our nafs and our carnal desires of food, drink, our desires for women, so all of our desires is fasting. That's what it is. And this leaving of desires is not found in any other worship apart from fasting. Okay, someone might say, okay, ihram. When we're in ihram, we can't have relations with your spouse. But this is only one type of desire that you're leaving. But the rest of the desires of food and drink, we're allowed to do. So this meaning isn't found in ihram either. Okay, someone might say, okay, this meaning is also found in salah. You're leaving all of these desires. Even more, you can't even look up. But the purpose of salah isn't to leave all your desires. Even it comes in a hadith that if the jama'ah of salah is taking place and there's food on the other side and you're hungry, you should eat first and miss the jama'ah. So that when you're praying, your mind shouldn't be towards the food. So the purpose of fasting isn't to leave this desire. And second is for a very short time. So this effect of leaving all of our desires isn't found. Because everyone can leave their desires for 5 minutes. We do it all the time. So this is the only ibadah, worship that we have, that we leave all of our desires, we break every single one of our desires. And those desires which I need as a human being to live, we even leave them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the month of Ramadan, a person's desires for food, drink, for one's spouse is bursting. And no one can see him apart from his Rabb. Every instinct is telling us to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfill these desires that Allah has given us. But the only thing that is preventing us from fulfilling our desires is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the evidence of Iman. This cannot happen from a person apart from Iman. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. Fasting is for me and I myself will recompense it. And this is actually the month of Ramadan. And I'm going to read a passage from Ibn Rajab's work. He says, فَإِذَا اشْتَدَّ تَوْقَانُ النَّفْسِ. When the desires of the nafs is bursting, إِلَى مَا تَشْتَهِيهِ مَعَ قُدْرَتِهَا عَلَيْهِ, towards that which he wants to fulfill, and he has complete ability to fulfill his desires. ثُمَّ تَرَكَتْهُ. Then the slave of Allah leaves this desire. لله عز وجل, only for the sake of Allah. في موضع لا يطلع عليه أحد إلا الله, in such a place that no one can see him apart from Allah. كان ذلك دليلا على صحة الإيمان. This is proof upon the validity of his iman. فإن الصائم يعلم أن له ربا يطلع عليه في خلوته. Because the صائم, the fasting person, is fully aware that he has a Rabb who is looking and watching him at all times in his solitude. وحرم عليه أن يتناول شهواته المجبولة على الميل إليها في الخلوة فأطاع ربه. Then the fasting person, he knowing that Allah is watching him, he obeys the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَامْتَثَلَ أَمْرًا, he subjugates to the command of Allah. وَاجْتَنَبَ نَهْيًا, he stays away from his prohibition. خوفا من عقابه, only reason because of the fear of punishment of Allah. وَرَغْبَةً فِي ثَوَابِهِ, hastening towards the rewards that Allah has promised. فَشَكَرَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى ذَلِكَ, and Allah becomes grateful for this. Allah becomes extremely grateful for this practice. وَاخْتَصَّ لِنَفْسِهِ عَمَلَهُ, Allah has desired and loved this action so much from His slaves that He has specified this action to Himself as opposed to all other actions. And this is why then the Prophet ﷺ, he comes on to the next part of the hadith, that Allah says, إِنَّهُ تَرَكَ شَهْوَتَهُ وَطَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ مِنْ أَجَلِي, that he has left his food, water and drink only for my sake. This is why this action of fasting is so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has made this the greatest month. And this, we're actually coming on to the purpose of fasting. So the purpose of fasting isn't just to stay hungry, but when the fasting person knows that the pleasure of his Rabb is in leaving his carnal desires. So as a human being, my pleasure is in eating, drinking, and fulfilling my sexual desires. This is where my pleasure is as a human being. Allah has made every single person like this. So my pleasure is inside fulfilling my desires, but in the month of Ramadan, I know and I realize that the pleasure of my Rabb is in leaving my pleasure. The pleasure of my Rabb is in leaving my pleasure and my carnal desires. So the slave in the month of Ramadan leaves his own desires and his own pleasures for the pleasure of his Lord. And this is a sign of Iman, and this is why this act of fasting is so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I read this, it changed my whole perception of fasting. That it wasn't just a ritual act that I'm doing, I'm staying hungry and thirsty. But the fasting is one of the greatest ways to connect myself towards Allah. That my desires become insignificant in front of the desires of Allah. Regardless of how far my nafs and my desires are pushing me to disobey Allah, I have this barrier that Allah is watching and I can never do this. Until we become the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the month to break our desires, to break the desires. All the desires which I have in my heart is supposed to break them and finish them just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inculcate the desire which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves in order to gain the sweetness of Iman. In the narration of Nasai, authentic narration, narrated from Anas radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ said, ثَلَاثٌ مَنْ كُنَّ فِيهِ وَجَدَ بِهِنَّ حَلَاوَةَ الْإِيمَانِ. So our aim should be in this month to gain the sweetness of Iman. And only those people who have tasted the sweetness of Iman will be able to explain and describe it. And the Prophet ﷺ has given us 3 prescriptions, have 3 things to do in order to gain the sweetness of Iman. And this should be our target in the month of Ramadan. How can I gain the sweetness of Iman? The Prophet ﷺ says 3 things. مَنْ كَانَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَحَبَّ إِلَيْهِ مِمَّا سِوَاهُ. That Allah and His Messenger becomes more beloved to Him than any single person in this world. And this is what we're trying to achieve through fasting. That Allah becomes more beloved to me than even my own desires. Forget the desires of other people. Forget other people, anyone else which exists. The only thing that should be our concern in the month of Ramadan is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That even we forget our own needs and necessities. So that's the first thing. How Allah becomes more beloved. And a sign that Allah is more beloved to us and His Messenger is that when 2 things are contradicting. On one hand, I have the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the other hand, I have, if I do this, I'll be disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which one do I choose? If I do this, I'll miss my salah. But if I don't do this, I'll lose out on my dunya, I'll lose out on my wealth. So which one do I do? These are the choices that show us who is more beloved in our life. Second thing, وَمَنْ أَحَبَّ الْمَرْءَ لَا يُحِبُّهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Whoever loves a person, Allah only loves him for the sake of Allah. And number 3, وَمَنْ يَكْرَهُ أَن يَرْجِعَ إِلَى الْكُفْرِ كَمَا يَكْرَهُ أَن يُلْقَى فِي النَّارِ. And this is very important for us to remember, especially the last condition, the last quality. That a person dislikes that he returns towards kufr, just how a person dislikes that he's thrown inside the fire. And this is what our aim has to be in the month of Ramadan. Before the month of Ramadan, before it comes, we come with many sins on our plate. Many disobedience of Allah, many salahs that we miss. Different forms of disobedience that takes place. We should make our month of Ramadan such that I've built such a connection with Allah that I would hate to go back to that disobedience. Just how I would dislike that I'd be thrown inside the fire. If I bring this quality, then I've attained the month of Ramadan. But normally what happens is, as soon as the month of Ramadan starts, we start praying a bit of our salah, start bringing our Taraweeh salah, our akhlaq becomes good, we start reading a bit of Quran, but as soon as the month of Ramadan goes, all of these is lost. Our amal generally starts to go down and become the same how we were before the month of Ramadan started. That's because in the month of Ramadan, we fail to attain the purpose of the month of Ramadan. These three qualities that the Prophet we discussed did not actually in reality come into our lives as yet. We live a zahiri and external amal that we relied upon, whereas these zahiri amal had not affect our hearts. Whereas the purpose of Ramadan is to change our hearts, not our actions. I'm going to repeat that statement again. The purpose of the month of Ramadan is firstly to change our hearts and not primarily our actions. Because it's possible that our actions can change for a month, but our heart is still the same. But when our hearts is changed, it's not possible that our actions will remain the same in disobedience. Because when our hearts change, the actions follow, and this change will last throughout the year. And another explanation of this hadith, فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ, is like Brother Shafi just mentioned, that fasting is a secret between the slave and his Rabb. This is why Imam Ahmad and others, Salaf, scholars of the past, they narrated that the angels do not even write down this deed, because this deed is a secret between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because fasting isn't something that a person can physically see, like salah or hajj and umrah. And that's why it's narrated from ulama of the past that they dislike that the angels should even write this down, or they should note it. They'd hope that, oh Allah, that don't even let the angels, they see this good deed of me, and you reward me in the day of judgment. Because two lovers, they dislike that the secret should be spread between the people. And similarly, the relationship we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a relationship of love. يُحِبُّونَهُ يُحِبُّهُ وَيُحِبُّونَهُ. That they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He loves them. So this, by fasting, we're building this relationship between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a secret between us and Allah. And this is obviously more applicable outside the month of Ramadan. It's also applicable in Ramadan as well. So now, when we fast, what happens is, when we leave our food and drink and our desires, then this starts breaking our nafs. Especially, in the month of Ramadan where sleeping is all over the place. Normally our set routine for sleeping and eating. This again is breaking our nafs. So we shouldn't displease at this. We should be happy that I'm training my nafs through this. Because when we break these nafs of overeating all the time and our desires, what happens is encouraged, because the whole year we're fulfilling our desires and requisites of our nafs increases, every time it increases. The more we act on our nafs, the more it increases. That's why a person first he has one house, but then he wants a second house, because now his nafs is increased. A person has a small amount of money, now after he attains that he wants more money. Every time we fulfill our desires increase. The purpose of this month of Ramadan is to break our desires. And normally what happens in the month of Ramadan, throughout the entire day we're breaking our desires. Eating, drinking. But as soon as iftar comes, we've fulfilled all of our desires. We've done qada and kafara of all of our desires that we've done, we spend so long in breaking. So when we break our fast for iftar, we should try to break our fast with simple food. Not, we eat more in Ramadan than we do throughout the entire year. So the entire purpose of Ramadan is not attained. So this is one thing we should try to do for at least this Ramadan. Try to eat simple. Try to eat simple in iftar, and try to eat simple for the suhoor as well. Because if we overeat in the month for iftar, then what happens? It makes all that heaviness that was in our body before, the food brings all of that heaviness back. Then I'm not able to perform the ibadah in the night. The Taraweeh is wasted, the Tahajjud is wasted. And the entire night is wasted. Whereas the night of Ramadan isn't meant for sleeping and enjoying. The night of Ramadan is meant for the Tahajjud Salah. It's fasting by day and standing in front of Allah by night. That's why I was reading about Mawlana Zakir rahimahullah, one of the great scholars of the Indian subcontinent. His entire Ramadan, he used to finish 31 khatams of the Quran. Imagine this, he passed away about 50 years ago. 31 khatams of the Quran he used to finish. One khatam was in the Taraweeh Salah. And every day of Ramadan he used to finish 2 khatams. One in the morning, one in the night. After Fajr Salah, he wouldn't be busy talking to his friends and having halaqas and everything in the masjid and wasting time until Ishraq. He'd start reciting the Quran. When after Ishraq time was started, he'd start his Salatul Ishraq. And inside that he'd recite many juz of the Quran. And same thing throughout the entire day. After iftar, he'd eat some light food. Normally he'd break his fast with tea, with one piece of roti, and then he'd have some pan, because the tradition of the people of India. That's what he'd eat for iftar. And then he'd stand up for his awabin salah. And inside that he'd recite many juz of the Quran until the time for Isha started. And after Isha and Taraweeh, there'd be about half an hour for people to meet him and ask him any questions and talk to him. And then after this, he'd start his Tahajjud Salah again. And this would continue all day throughout the night. This is how the elders and the ulama of the past spent the Ramadan. They took every single second of this time. They valued every second of this time. A person, he came to me, just before, I think this was last Ramadan. He said to me, he says, Shaykh or Mawlana, I'm looking for a job. It's just a few days before Ramadan. I asked him, okay, how come you're looking for a job? It's Ramadan. He goes, exactly, it's Ramadan, looking for a job. How am I supposed to spend all my time? I'm going to be at home and, what am I going to do? Then I realized, subhanAllah, how far have we come from the life of the ulama of the past? How far have we come from the life of the Prophet ﷺ? When as soon as Ramadan would start, the Prophet ﷺ would exert himself in worship. He'd exert himself in charity. Despite how much he devoted outside Ramadan, even when Ramadan came, he exerted himself even more. But today we're trying to find things to do which aren't the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can I utilize my time not worshipping Allah in the month of Ramadan? How far have we come? And that's why our entire month of Ramadan is wasted. Because of this, our entire year is wasted as well. So when we fast, we break our nafs. And number 2, by fasting, what it does, it frees the heart to dhikr and tafakkur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It frees the heart for solitude. Because what happens is fulfilling his desires throughout the year, it hardens the heart. Try it. What you do, you have a full meal and then sit down to recite the Quran and dhikr of Allah or salah. Your heart won't be in that action. Only when this food has gone and digested, then you'll find the benefits of this action. And this is what the fasting does. It gives room and illuminates our heart. It puts nur into the heart. And gives us time to do dhikr and tafakkur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And removes the ghafla from the heart. Another benefit of fasting is the wealthy person. He recognizes the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That how Allah has prevented food and drink from people throughout the entire year. And imagine what they are feeling. And how Allah, those people that are unmarried, aren't able to fulfill their desires. This is now we get to taste of how this feels as well. How when we're not allowed to fulfill our desires. So when we fast, fasting isn't just staying hungry and thirsty. Fasting is breaking our desires until our desires become and conform to the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So throughout the entire Ramadan, I desire what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desires from me. And I dislike what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes for me. This is why the Prophet said, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. That whoever does not leave whoever does not leave evil speech and bad actions in the month of Ramadan, Allah has no need for that person to leave his food and drink. Because that's not the purpose of fasting. Allah hasn't told us to fast just to leave our food and leave eating and drinking. Allah has told us to fast to break our desires so that our life is in conformity to the commands of Allah and even our desires are in conformity to the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the highest level of fasting which Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he talks about in his Ihya Ulumuddin. That is what I should try and achieve. How can I make my life according to the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ as well, that no one truly believes until his desires become subservient to the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the height of Iman. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought the fasting upon us. Narrated from some of the Salaf of the past that أهون الصيام ترك الشراب والطعام. The easiest fasting is leaving food and drink. That is the easiest fasting to do. That's not difficult at all, the saying. وقال جابر إذا صمت فليصم سمعك. So إذا صمت, Jabir rahimahullah, he used to say that when you fast, فليصم سمعك, that let your ears fast. وبصرك ولسانك عن الكذب والحرام. Let your mouth fast from the disobedience of Allah. Let your eyes fast from the disobedience of Allah. And this is the definition of fasting. That your entire body is fasting, not just your stomach and your throat. Your entire body should be fasting. What that means that where we control our body stops the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is now going linking back to the verse of the Quran that Allah said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, the purpose of fasting, so that you have taqwa. So that you bring this taqwa and fear, such fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into your life that your heart fears to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this should be our goal in this month of Ramadan. If we haven't been able to achieve this in the previous months, we should make preparations from now. That okay, these months of Ramadan have gone, these years have gone. Now what can I do this Ramadan that I can fulfill this? Number one, we try to take out those things which I don't need to in the month of Ramadan. I analyze my life and go, what am I doing right now that I can cut down in the month of Ramadan? So I take these out of my life. Those that are working, is there any possibility of taking days off in the month of Ramadan? Can I lessen my shift in the month of Ramadan? So I make these preparations from now. Then I see, okay, what can I do extra to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then just to finish off the hadith, and then we'll conclude inshallah, and we'll go through if there's any questions and answers regarding Ramadan. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَةً, that the fasting person, so going back to the original hadith which I chose to explain. So the fasting person has two happinesses, which is number one, the fasting which is in the time of iftar. Because once we've suppressed our desires, once they're permitted, our desires for these will grow even more. That's why in iftar we eat as if we make our eyes bigger than our stomachs. We get so much food that it seems okay to the eyes, but our stomachs they can't control. So that's the first happiness. And the second happiness is obviously when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And going back to the hadith of Sufyan ibn Uyayna, because this reward of fasting is stored with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which no one can touch. This is why when we see this reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at our meeting, we will be extremely happy. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, As-siyamu junnah, that this fasting is a shield. Which this means that in the hadith the Prophet ﷺ says that shaitan flows through the veins of a person just like blood flows through his veins. This fasting, it breaks his desires and stops the wasawis shayateen. This is why it's very easy for us to fast in the month of Ramadan. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, just rushing through the hadith, وَلَا خَلُوفُ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أَتْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ, that the smell of a fasting person, or the emanating from his mouth, is more beloved to Allah than the smell of musk. Which means, this is because the smell is purely due to the worship and obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah loves His obedience so much that even this is beloved to Him. Because the smell is a result of His obedience, that's why even the smell is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many narrations from the muhaddithin, scholars of the past, that when the sa'imin, those people who fast constantly, will be resurrected on the Day of Judgment, there will be a fragrant smell emanating from their mouths, and every single person will be able to smell it. And on that day, Allah will show to the rest of creation who the sa'imin were on this day. So then Allah will reveal that person's secrets on the Day of Judgment. So this will be a reward for going through this trouble in this world. So now we need to see and analyze in our lives, what can we do to attain the most out of this Ramadan. Number one, we read the Quran as much as possible. Because this month, and I'm going to conclude here, because this month is a month of the Quran. The reason why this month has such importance is because of the Quran. And this is how Allah introduces this month to us. He says, شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ. Allah explains the month of Ramadan, it's a month of the Quran. This is why Imam Shafi rahimahullah is narrated 60 or 61 khatams of the Quran he would do. Imagine 60 or 61 khatams of the Quran. One in Taraweeh and a 60th throughout the whole of Ramadan. And likewise all the scholars of the past, this is how they were. Imam Mawlana Zakir rahimahullah, he writes regarding the women in his house, that 15 to 20 juz of the Quran will be read daily by the women of his house, despite the domestic responsibilities. I mentioned before, Mawlana Zakir rahimahullah do 31 khatams of the Quran. His disciples that would come to him to learn, he'd encourage them, the criteria to put for them was a criteria of Imam Shafi rahimahullah. He'd encourage all of his students to read, to perform 60 khatams of the Quran. Some would do 60, some would do 50, 40, 30, but that would be the criteria, that would be their target. So one would read as much of the Quran as possible. And I'm going to finish now, in 1 minute inshallah. So, number one, what we do, we read the Quran. Let's say we have 1 hour, we have 2 hours. 50% of that time we spend in reading the Quran. 25% of that time we spend it in reading the translation of the Quran to understand what the Quran is saying. 25% of that time we spend it in memorizing the Quran, because this holds extreme reward. And then we're able to recite these verses, memorizing our salah. Recite Surah Yasin every day, Surah Mulk, Surah Sajdah, all these surahs that come in daily. The tahajjud salah, the secret to attain the love of Allah is the tahajjud salah. I do not believe that a person can attain the love of Allah and become the beloved of Allah in the month of Ramadan without praying the tahajjud salah. I do not believe that it's possible. Because the tahajjud salah has been given to us to attain that love. But in the month of Ramadan, this is neglected. The entire night is gone talking, and the last portion of the night is gone eating. This Ramadan, everyone try to make an intention that every single night I'm going to pray my tahajjud salah, even if it's 2 rakats, and I'm going to get my family and my children to pray tahajjud salah. See how the environment of the home changes. See how the barakah and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes into a person's life. This should be my intention. And once you read the Quran, translation of the Quran, memorize the Quran. Number 4, the tahajjud salah, at least minimum 2 rakats, and then make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other things we can do is follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and read as much the sunnah and du'as which come into our lives. The sunnah and nawafil salah, the salatul ishraq in the morning, salatul duha after that, salatul awabin, all the sunnah prayers that we can do. And then the parents' responsibility to create the environment in the home for the children. Because if the parents don't, number one, if the parents don't perform their salah or worship Allah, number one, their sin. And the second sin is because for not having the created environment in the home for the children, for they get double sins. So it's a responsibility of the parents to create that environment. And the way we can do that is to perform the amal together. The father should be taking the sons to the masjid every single day for iftar and for other salahs. And the ta'aleem should be taking place at home. And we sit as a family, read from the book of virtues to encourage the family to attain as much reward as possible. And lastly, I finish with this, the children should always see the parents in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so the children understand the importance of this month. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to value this month of Ramadan, to prepare for the month of Ramadan before it comes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use this Ramadan and make it different to all the other Ramadans that have gone by in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this and use Ramadan to affect our hearts and change our lives further, rest of the year and the rest of our life inshallah.